My name is Michael Howe, again from Gluware, and we're going to be introducing use case number 3. Co-presenting with me will be John Anderson, one of our software architects we're happy to have here with us, who's done a lot of work on this, so very happy that he could join us. We're going to talk about Ansible Integrations. So just to show around the room, who's played with Ansible, used Ansible a little bit, trying to help customers use Ansible? Okay, so a fair number. What we're seeing is Ansible's been around for a while in the DevOps side. On the NetOps side, there's been a lot of progress, and there's modules for quite a few things in the networking space. So being open source and being available, people are jumping on this and starting to use it. So we engage with customers, and they say they're a little bit hesitant when they look at Gluware and say, I've invested time and effort, and I have some playbooks and some things that are working for me. One of the pain points around Ansible is that Ansible requires an inventory. It requires the playbook itself and then the underlying module. The inventory is a static file. So if you don't get that right or you haven't maintained it, you're going to have problems with your playbook. And then the other piece of it is you execute that script, a playbook, and you get kind of a confirmation it ran, but you don't know exactly what happened on the device. So wrapping it with Gluware Drift and Audit and other capabilities, Gluware can be highly complementary, even if you're not using Gluware for the advanced networking automation, which is really a better fit. So what we're going to showcase in this demonstration is we have an Ansible plugin that it leverages our device manager to dynamically create that inventory file for you. We'll also show how you can also pass variables from Gluware and use within Ansible. So you can essentially use Gluware as a source of truth and not have to maintain separately in text files, in YAML files and things like that. And again, just how John's going to show you a bit of changing things in Ansible, but looking at it through Gluware like Drift to show you exactly what changed on the device. So with that, we'll switch over to John's monitor here.
Unlike these other guys, only on one slide. So
thank you.
This is our entry slide here that Mike Howe just went over, which is the use case 2 or use case 3. So what I'm going to do is give you a demo of 3 different playbooks. But first I want to cover a little bit of information about what I'm demoing. So we have a inventory plugin in Ansible that allows you to get to our devices that are inside of Gluware. And the way you install that on your Ansible system is you do a pip install Gluware-Ansible-inventory, and then you will get the inventory plugin. And then I'll cover a little bit of how you configure that inventory plugin. And again, I'm going to cover about three playbooks. I'm going to go over some how it interacts with our devices to get the inventory for your playbooks. How it uses the attributes that are on our devices inside of your playbooks, so you can use them for your logic inside of your playbooks. We use, in our inventory plugin, we use the Ansible Network OS, which is a standard property in a lot of the modules that come from Ansible networking subgroup. And also in organizing the way the devices are reported to the playbooks, we group those by the Ansible networking OS. So with that, I'm going to switch to the demo mode. Okay, so this is my control setup that I have, and I have just a list of 2 iOS devices and 5 NOx switches. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, so my setup that I have here, I'm using my Windows box. And I'm using Cygwin, where I have Ansible installed. So I have Ansible, I have Python 3.6 installed, and I have some modules from Ansible also installed, and I have my inventory plugin already installed. I've already done the pip install. And I'm going to use VS Code today, or Visual Studio Code, to show you the files and how everything interacts. So the first thing you need to know when you set up, when you're working with Ansible, you need usually an Ansible config file. And I'm working from my test Ansible directory, and I have this config file set up, and it points to my this Gluware devices YAML file as my inventory, and it's also a file that lives in this directory. And this is how I marry up my Ansible system through the inventory plugin to the Gluware system that I'm connected to. I'm at this particular IP address, and I'm using this username and password. I have it set up in my, I've created that username and password inside of my control system, and I said, you have access to these particular devices. And then this is just allowing me to have a cert location. This part of the setup allows me to map variables that we have inside of Gluware to variables I want to use inside of Ansible. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a demo of a particular playbook that I have that shows you the information that I have on my devices. And it's just, I call it display facts. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this in here, and go ahead and run it. And while it's running, I'm going to show you what the code does. So this is the playbook itself, and the playbook's running right here in the background. And it has 3 tasks. And I'm running on all of the hosts that I have currently set up in that particular organization I showed you inside of Gluware. And the first task is to gather the facts. And since I've asked Ansible Playbook to give me all of the hosts, I need to narrow down for this particular task. Since I'm running the iOS facts module, I only want to see the ones for iOS. So I'm using the standard Ansible Network OS to the iOS with the iOS command, and it's only gathering the facts for the iOS switch. And you can see back here, it's skipped over my NOx switches because those don't match that criteria. Now it's gone on to the next task, which is this task here, gather the NOx facts. And again, I have this task here, and I'm using the NOx module. And the last task is to display the information about the facts. And this gives me a quick little demonstration of how we can access the attributes. And this is, if you're used to using Ansible, then this is just the Ninja 2 templating modes where you can just display something. From the facts, I was able to gather the Ansible network host name, the Ansible version name. This serial number here came from the inventory plugin through our inventory plugin in Gluware. If I go back to Gluware and I look, I have a serial number column here. And this serial number column is the information for that particular host that popped up in my playbook. So let me bring these back up.
And just to wrap that around is how is Ansible able to talk to Gluware? We have a published API. So John wrote the plugin that is leveraging our published API to make a programmatic call to Gluware to interact with that information.
Okay, so, and the last thing I want to show is I have a custom attribute that I added inside of Gluware, and I was able to also use that in my Ansible plugin to get some information that I wanted to assign, which I'm going to use in my next examples, which is the NTTP server I wanted to have for each of my hosts. So I call it NTP server spec, and again, that's this particular column over here, and I can edit this spec. I can edit the attribute of it. I can change its number. I can change what it is and save it, and it would be associated to that device. And then I can use that in my further playbooks. So I see I'm running a little short on time, so I think what I'm going to do is skip ahead to the last playbook. Well, actually, this one's pretty short. So this is a standard playbook that you would run. You say, I want to change all of my my iOS devices to this NTP server. So if I go ahead and run this playbook, then what I'm going to do is grab this command, paste it in here, run it. So this will run this particular playbook, and it's just doing this one task. It's updating the 2223. But what's interesting about this is if I run this, it just adds that NTTP server. Really what I wanted it to do was to replace it. And I can verify that by switching in Gluware over to our Config Audit application. And I can click both these iOS devices that I'm currently running that playbook against and do what we call a capture. And what that does is that goes out to the devices, and you can see it running right here with these little dots. It's going out to the devices and getting what the current config is for that device. This is a snapshot feature of our Config Drift. And it's going to show, and earlier before the demo, I had taken a snapshot with the golden config of those devices. And now it's showing me that there's a difference. I have this little icon up here that pops up, and it'll show me a difference. And this is the change the Ansible playbook just did in the background while I was clicking around here. And this is what the old device had on it. And this is the new config. And the change it's showing me is it added this 2223 that I asked the Ansible playbook to do. But it also had the old one in there, which isn't my desired effect. It's not exactly what I wanted it to do. And the same with this other device. So I've got a third playbook to fix all this. And I'm going to go ahead and run that while this is being displayed so that...
So while John's running that, that Drift utility or app gives you the ability to say, what did Ansible do on my network devices? Sometimes when you're running scripts, you're lacking that visibility. And then, you could, using Drift, you can see exactly what changed. Using Audit, if you have an expected state, you can just audit for the expected state. And if something is not meeting the expected state, it's going to violate your audit. So it's again around Drift and Audit and the Ansible plugin complementing what you may be doing through Ansible.
So I increased the intelligence of my playbook. This is the second version of that NTT playbook. And I increased the intelligence. I have 5 tasks here now. The first thing I decided, okay, I need to grab the config first. So I'm using this module to grab the config, and I store it in this variable. And in the second task, I'm going, okay, I need to, from this config, basically extract out where the NTP server lines are. So that's what this logic's doing. And then in the third task, I'm taking that logic that I got from the previous task, and I'm saying remove all those NTP servers that I found, because I don't want any of them. I'm going to put my own in. So that's what this particular command is. There's no NTP server and the particular item that I extracted. And then the last one is, okay, now apply the NTP server, but this time instead of a hard-coded value that I had in my previous playbook, grab it from the config that I had, or the information that I had inside of my device that I had managed inside of Gluware. So then it went ahead and it ran that config and it did those changes. So if I go back over here and I click these 2 items again and click them without highlighting things, and then click the capture again, it'll go back out, start a capture on those devices, and it'll either, if it shows me these double circles where it's unchanged, that means I'm back in line with my reference implementation, which was basically when I captured the original config. It had this NTP server set to that one, and this one set to 3.3.3.3. So this one shows me it's back to alignment, and it's back to alignment. If I double click on this, I can go find the NTP server line somewhere in this config. It's probably toward the bottom. Keep going. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, it set it back to this. And the reason I didn't see a diff, because it now matches my golden config. So now it's in a line.
Question on the Ansible. One of the powers of Ansible is being able to group items based on location or whatever you want to do.
Yes.
Can you do that with pulling from Gluware to say, only make the change to the devices with this type of description, or I guess location per se?
Yes, so I did that kind of in the first playbook. I used the where clause, the when clause on the...
With iOS.
Yeah, inside of the tasks themselves. But usually the way you group them is you can group them by this. Yeah, so I group them by iOS. So out of the box, we support the mappings between our discovery, when we do discovery on a device, the mappings of that variable to the variable that's used in Ansible.
I'm like location, like when I'm doing Ansible playbooks for some of my customers, I'm changing one of the locations and not the entire infrastructure that they have. Like I'm doing a site in this city or a site in, not doing everything that's Junos or whatever.
So that's good feedback, but what could be easily done to support that is I could add another section in here in the configuration section, so you can tell me what attributes you want to group by. Mm-hmm. And then you could add that attribute to this section that configures the way the information's basically mapped from Gluware into the Ansible playbook. And then I could grab that. So in my particular example,
yeah, you can show maybe the custom fields.
Yeah. Well, I actually have one for it. I actually have that case. So he was saying area. So I added to my devices area as another custom field, and I had like here for front office. But I could create different areas.
Okay.
And the way you add custom fields into Gluware is you go to System Settings, you go into Organizations, and then you have a series of custom fields here, and you could add your own custom field in, and you could make up, whatever kind of field you want, like I don't know, sub area.
I could specify the YAML file to use for the configuration to say only do the ones from here versus using the YAML group that have to use a different type of query into the Gluware.
So right now, you could do it quickly with the query. I would have to make an update to the plugins based on your feedback so that you could map it to a group. Because the groups affect how the inventory items get fed into into the Ansible playbooks.
Correct.
So I could use a custom attribute. I could basically set it up so you could use a custom attribute.
Cool.
So that does conclude use case number 3. So at this point, we'd like to just open it up for any final questions or comments across the use cases or about Gluware in general. Also, as we're showing this final slide, one thing I'd like to invite folks in the room or folks watching online is that we offer a completely virtual test drive experience with Gluware. It's not quite like sitting in a Tesla, I don't think, but you know, you can at least request access online. We facilitate a fully online demo, and it's got a number of use cases you can walk through and kick the tires and at least get a hands-on feel for some of the features of Gluware. So one action I could ask is if anyone is really interested in Gluware, go ahead and request that test drive, and we'll let you check it out hands-on.